Hello all, welcome to another lesson of the Rook versus Pawns endgames. This lesson will cover the outflanking technique. We will look at this study from Richard Réti, 1928, if I'm not mistaken. This is a famous study. What is outflank in practice? Outflanking is we want to go with our king to the other side of the pawn, so to the other side of the black king, so we can grab the pawn. But if you notice for the starting position, Black's king is very well placed, defensive shouldering away the white's king, and at the same time is attacking our rook. So first we need to cover where to place our rook. And here comes the problem. Because let's start, for example, to try to cut off the king. Well, this is obviously a mistake because besides the king is very well placed, we really can't cut it on the fifth rank. So we are cutting on the fourth rank, and as we know already, it's impossible to stop the pawn from promoting when it's on the fourth rank. Let's see, for example, what happens. The pawn advances. I try to move my king, trying to cut away Black's king with the rook. But now the pawns advance anymore. The rook can take the pawn directly. Okay, so we need to approach our king because, for example, if we try to reach the pawn, Black's king can simply protect it. So we go around, but we don't reach on time. And if you notice, it's going to be a draw in the end. So let's come back to the first position. We saw that the other side it will be the same. So we saw now that it's impossible to keep cutting off the king. So obviously the rook needs to stay on the d file. But where? Again, the most natural position is to play rook d1, but surprise, surprise, it's a mistake. Why it's a mistake? Because we are going to need every tempo we can get to be able to outflank black to the other side. So now, for example, black advances the pawn. Notice that if black advances the king, is allowing our king to outflank it. Let's see, for example, what happens if black moves the king. Then now we have an easy route to the other side, and we are going to use it. So the pawn advanced, but now we are attacking with two pieces the pawn. The pawn is forced to advance again, and again we have two pieces attacking, and it's impossible for black either advancing the pawn. We take it, and if it advances the king, we take it anyway. So not possible to advance the king. Also, the defensive side needs to know how to secure the draw. So advancing the pawn is the way. Now, if our king moves, basically white is in zugzwang. This is a mutual zugzwang position, and the most important to understand when we are starting to calculate moves, because if it's black to move now, we win the game. So why it is important not to go to rook d1? Because now we don't have a free tempo anywhere. Let's see, for example, if we try to pass the move for black, like playing rook d2. Uh, Simply going with the rook, with the king. Now we try to outflank. Notice the plan is to reach the pawn, but unlucky for white, black is faster because it earns a tempo here. And now, even if I go down, it's a simply matter of reaching, and we can't avoid the promotion of the pawn. And now we need to sacrifice, and now it's a draw. So this is a lost position. If black advances and I try to move my king, for example, over here, to go in a long outflanking, we can't waste tempo over this position. So the long outflanking is not the ideal outflanking. Black can keep the defensive shouldering, and it's the smart move. Otherwise, if we go here, it is going to be a mistake again, because now we can reach with time. So again, moving the king, and again we keep the defensive shouldering. So white is forced to move again. If we move the rook, we already know that black will recover the tempo attacking the rook, so it's not possible. So we move the king, and what is the smart move from black? Of course, we keep shouldering the king away. And if white can't progress, it's a draw. Okay, now that we have discovered that coming directly to d1 is not possible and we want to reach that position we saw before, let me show it again. We want to reach this position but with black to move, we need to reserve that tempo. How can we do it? Playing, for example, rook d2. Rook d2, now black to move. Of course, we don't want to move the king, otherwise we are going to allow white king to outflank us. For example, if we move here, it's going to be really fast. We can't attack the rook, otherwise we lose the pawn. So we need to advance the pawn, and again we attack the pawn with two pieces, advancing again, and now it's lost. So this is not possible, so we need to advance the pawn. We advance the pawn, and if you look now, we are almost in the position we want, and so if we move here, it's black to move. So we reached exactly the same position that we wanted, but now the zugzwang it's on black's move. Of course, black can't do much. Either it abandons the defensive shouldering now, or tries to keep the king away like it did before, moving sideways. Of course, now white should not go outflanking too soon, because otherwise the king can go back and keep the defensive shouldering. So the right move is to go keeping the same distance. Now black to move again. Of course, we can't allow the pawn, and whatever move black does for one side, we go to the other side. If the king tries to go to the e file, then we are going to enter to the other side. So let's see just one example. King moves to e4. So now we can approach. The outflanking is completed. We are now attacking the pawn. Of course, the king can't attack our rook, otherwise we take the pawn with the rook. So the pawn needs to advance. We attack the pawn again, and again the pawn will be lost. Okay, hope you have enjoyed. This was an interesting study. I suggest you try to see it for yourself. There's also a possibility to play, instead of rook d2, rook d3. I suggest you can, for example, study that, because it's going to be the same situation. Not so easy without the tips, but next time you face something like this and you need to outflank to the other side, just remember that you need to do it in the smallest tempo possible. Okay, hope you have enjoyed. See you next lessons. Bye bye.